about the gingival diseases in childhood. Now, gingiva in childhood and gingiva in adolescence is having slight difference. Now, first of all, we will see the characteristic features of the gingiva in childhood. The gingiva in childhood is pelvic and firm. 56% of the stippling is present between ages 3 and 10 years. The interdental gingiva is broad faciolingually and tends to be relatively narrow mesiodistally. Mean sulcus depth is 1 to 2 millimeter. The width of a tall gingiva is greater in the incisor area. It decreases over the cuspids and increases again over premolars and permanent molars. Radiographically, lamina dura is wider in deciduous dentition. The marrow spaces of the bone, they are larger. Crest of the interdental bony septa are flat with bony crest within 1 to 2 millimeter of C junction. Now we will see which are the different gingival diseases common in childhood. First is chronic marginal gingivitis. This is the most prevalent type. Change in color, size, consistency and surface texture is similar to chronic inflammation in adults. Bleeding and increase in pocket depth, not that often. Inflammatory response is dominated by B lymphocytes. Hence, it rarely progresses to periodontitis. Then we will see about puberty gingivitis. The most commonly involved age is 11 to 13 years. Most frequent manifestation is bleeding and inflammation in the interproximal areas. Primary positive agent is dental plaque, usually resolves after puberty. Eruption gingivitis. Gingivitis associated with eruption, it is very common. Tooth itself doesn't cause gingivitis. Inflammation caused by plaque accumulation, perhaps secondary to discomfort caused by brushing in the tribal areas. Gingiva also appears red due to lack of keratinization. Localized juvenile spongiatic gingival hyperplasia. Unrelated to plaque accumulation, pathogenesis not well defined. The lesions are localized patches on the entire gingiva, bright red in color, raised overgrowth, painless, associated with easy bleeding. Most commonly seen on the anterior, labial, maxillary and mandibular area. Seen commonly between 8 and 14 years of age. Aggressive periodontitis. Early onset of disease. Occur around the time of puberty. Localized aggressive periodontitis has been defined as interproximal attachment loss on at least 2 permanent first molars and incisors with attachment loss on no more than 2 teeth other than first molars and incisors. Localized form common in pubertal age. Generalized form of aggressive periodontitis, which is defined as a generalized interproximal attachment loss, including at least 3 teeth that are not first molars and incisors and is rare among children. Now we'll see the therapeutic considerations for pediatric patients. Medical and dental history should be recorded for each child. Periodontal indices need not be recorded during the primary dentition unless child exhibits signs of aggressive periodontitis. With screening usually sufficient for children up to the age of 11 years. And counseling about toothbrushing, plaque removal and balance diet should be provided. Counseling of the parents is also necessary in pediatric patients. Acute gingival conditions. Now, necrotizing ulcerative gingivitis, acute herpetic gingival stomatitis and pericoronitis. These are the most commonly seen acute gingival conditions. Now, first of all, we will see about the necrotizing ulcerative gingivitis. Now, in necrotizing ulcerative gingivitis, we can see necrosis and sloughing of the gingival tissues. It may be accompanied by systemic symptoms. Patient usually report with systemic manifestations like fever, malaise, lymphadenopathy. Clinically, you can see punch-out crater-like depressions at the crest of the interdental papillae. Surface of the crater is covered by grey pseudomembranous slough. There is a spontaneous gingival hemorrhage and pronounced bleeding after the slightest stimulation. There is a fetid odor and increased salivation. The bacteria involved are Physosporidial complex. Now, what is the treatment? Now in the first visit, take detailed history of the patient, perform clinical examination, extraoral examination for lymphadenopathy, intraoral examination for oral cavity. Then perform the treatment, give topical anesthesia to remove the pseudomembrane and non-attached surface debris. Patient is also told to rinse the mouth every 2 hours with a glassful of an equal mixture of warm water and 3% hydrogen peroxide. Patients having local lymphadenopathy with other systemic symptoms, you can advise antibiotic regime, that is penicillin 500 mg orally every 6 hours. Metronidazole 500 mg twice daily for 7 days is also effective. And antibiotics you can continue until the systemic complications or the local lymphadenopathy has subsided. If the patient is having pain, you can also advise anti-inflammatory analgesics to the patient. Then primary herpetic gingival stomatitis. Now this is a viral infection. It is caused by herpes simplex virus type 1. Most often among infants and children who are younger than 6 years. In this gingival stomatitis, you can see erythematous shiny involvement of the gingiva and the adjacent oral mucosa. There is edema and gingival bleeding. The lesions are characterized by discrete spherical grey vesicles which can occur on the gingiva, lingual and the buccal mucosae, soft palate and on the tongue. What is the treatment? Topical anesthetics like 2% lidocaine, 0.1% diaclonium hydrochloride. In some cases, systemic administration of the analgesics is also given. Topical anti-infective agents, it is also given to prevent secondary infections. Agents used are 0.2% chlorhexidine, gluconate, tetracycline mouthwash can be given. Supportive care is needed. Fluid is given to maintain proper hydration and electrolyte balance. Ask the patient to maintain good oral hygiene. Antipyretics also be given to control the fever. Or cyclovir, that is the antiviral drug in optimal dosages, that is 1000 to 1600 mg daily for 7 to 10 days. Then pericoronitis. It is an inflammation of the gingiva in relation to the crown of an incompletely erupted tooth. It occurs most often in the mandibular third molar area. It can be acute, subacute or chronic. And it occurs due to accumulation of food debris between the crown of the tooth and the overlying gingival plaque. Clinical features, you can see that there is a red swollen suppurating lesion that is exquisitely tender with radiating pains to the ear, throat and floor of the mouth. There is a foul smell. Sometimes patient also comes with the extraoral swelling. There is a trismus, lymphadenopathy. Now in that cases, examination has to be started from extraoral examination, then intraoral examination. Treatment, you have to give the antibiotics if there is a systemic involvement. Intraorally, you go for irrigation, debridement, then oral hygiene, maintenance. Go for intraoral or extraoral. If patient is having trismus, go for extraoral X-ray. If patient is not having trismus, go for intraoral X-rays. And the decision of whether to go for extraction or oropharyngelectomy is based upon the position of the third molar. Then we'll see about the dyspyramidal gingivitis. What is dyspyramidal gingivitis? Dyspyramidal gingivitis is a clinical feature. It is not a diagnosis. It is described as a reaction characterized by intense erythema, dyspyramidation, and ulceration of the free and the attached gingiva. It ranges from mild burning sensation to intense pain. Approximately 50% of the dyspyramidal gingivitis cases are localized to the gingiva. Lichen planus and cicatricial ventriculoid account for 84% of the dyspyramidal gingivitis cases. And in such patients, you can see the systemic involvement of the, or you can see the skin lesions also. Now we'll see the diagnostic findings for conditions that can manifest as dyspyramidal gingivitis. Now, in pemphigus, histopathologically, you can see intraepithelial clefting above the basal cell layer. Basal cells have a characteristic tombstone appearance. There is acantholysis. In cicatricial pemphigoid and in bullous pemphigoid, clefting with epithelial separation from the underlying lamina propria, leaving an intact basal layer. In chronic ulcerative stomatitis, similar to erosive lichen planus, you can see hyperkeratosis, acanthosis, basal cell layer liquefaction, subepithelial clefting, and lymphohistiocytic chronic infiltrate pad-like configuration. In dermatitis, herpetoformis, you can see collection of neutrophils, eosinophils, and fibrin in the connective tissue papillae. In systemic lupus erythematosus, you can see hyperkeratosis, basal cell degeneration, epithelial atrophy, and perivascular inflammation. Now we'll see what is the treatment, therapeutic approaches for treating the selected condition that manifests as discriminative gingivitis. Now in erosive lichen planus, if the cases are mild, then you can go for delivery of therapeutic agent like Lidex, which contains 0.05% of fluocinonide gel, which can be applied to the affected area. But if the cases are severe or refractory cases, you have to refer the patient to the dermatologist, where the patient has prescribed the systemic corticosteroid. Now, cicatricial pemphigoid Lidex, that is 0.05% fluocinonide, or Tempovate, that is 0.05% clobestrol propionate, can be given. Now, here dermatologists usually prescribe prednisone, that is 20 to 30 milligram per day, along with azathioprine, that is immunosuppressant. In pemphigus, usually it is referred to the dermatologist, where prednisone is given along with immunosuppressant. So, in chronic ulcerative stomatitis also the Lidex, that is fluocinonide gel, is given. So, in discriminative gingivitis, usually the topical application of the corticosteroid is usually prescribed or it is given, it is advisable. But in severe cases, the systemic administration of corticosteroid along with the immunosuppressant